Hello, okay, so this is the first presentation for military personnel and their families, and this is the psychology of the deployment cycle. I'm a chaplain in the Royal Air Force, and this is one of the presentations that we normally give when people are about to deploy or when they return from deployment. And the whole purpose of these presentations is to raise the psychological literacy of military families, thereby making them more resilient to endure the various ups and downs of military life. So this is a really fascinating sort of psychological insight to what people go through, and I hope you find it helpful. I've been asked many times to make this publicly available on YouTube so that many more people can benefit from it, apart from those who can actually physically get to the presentations. So here we go. I hope you enjoy. This presentation really hinges on three psychological principles. The first and most important is the principle of emotional spare capacity. We can illustrate emotional spare capacity by this line. So, there we go. So this is the emotional spare capacity available to you at any one time. And each person, of course, has their quota sort of set, if you like. And this is your baseline when you're completely chilled out. This would be, say, your tipping point when you've been completely stressed out and you couldn't take any more. Ideally, on a day-to-day basis, you'd be at your baseline, and so you'd have all this emotional spare capacity available to you at any given time. So this is the emotional energy we all possess, which we can invest in relationships, in jobs, in hobbies, in our family, and all the things we enjoy in life. To the degree that we are stressed out or worried or anxious about something, we tend to lose emotional spare capacity. And that means we've got less emotional energy to give to our relationships and to our everyday lives. And that's when trouble can occur, in that we can become angry more easily, we can get more easily upset, we can become anxious or irritable, and all the sort of effects that stress tends to have on us. Now, if you imagine the length of this sheet of paper as a sort of timeline, and we'll assume that we begin our journey with our full quota of emotional spare capacity. But of course that will be different at any given time for any different, each individual person. It may be that you have money worries, relationship worries, health concerns, whatever it is. So at any given time, it's the fairly lucky individual, in fact, who has the full emotional capacity available to them. But we'll imagine the best case scenario, and we'll also pitch this at a typical family situation. Now, it wouldn't take much imagination to adapt these ideas to any other scenario for single people about to go on deployment, for instance. But we'll take a family as our example. So we're ticking along quite happily, life is good, we have full emotional capacity, no particular worries going on. And then the notice to deploy is given. And you can see the notice to deploy, the date will be somewhere out here. Now what we have discovered tends to happen is that as we approach the deployment date, we have a sort of cone effect happening. This is because of the stress of the preparation for deployment, all the courses to be done, the kitting to be done, all the administrative arrangements. Plus, of course, the family members know that they're going to be separated for a considerable period of time. And that preys on the minds of each family member as they wonder how they're going to cope and manage these separations. So what tends to happen is this. As we approach the going away date, our capacity gets taken away from us to some degree. You see my skills as an artist come into the fore here. But as we approach this going away date, we lack the emotional spare capacity we had at the beginning. Now this is going on for each family member. The serving person will be quite commonly experiencing degrees of stress as the going away date comes. This will all, of course, be affected by several factors. Is it the first deployment? Have they been before? Are they going on their own as a single skilled person, or are they going as part of a formed unit with their friends? Where are they going? How long are they going for? All these different factors are going to affect how they feel about deploying. Similarly, what are they leaving behind? Are they leaving behind a mature, experienced, well-oiled system, a family who's experienced these things before, has no particular issues? Or will they be leaving behind a slightly more stressy situation? So all that will prey on the mind to different degrees, and no psychological model fits everybody perfectly all of the time, but this model has been shown to fit a lot of people a lot of the time. So hopefully you'll all find something helpful in it. But it's not just the serving person, of course, who is starting to get a bit concerned as the going away date approaches. It's those he's leaving behind as well. So those being left behind, spouses, children, parents, they may be wondering, how will I cope when that serving person is absent? Who will take over the share of the family jobs that that person normally takes on? How will I emotionally cope with missing them? If the relationships are a bit shaky, what's going to happen? Because absence doesn't always make the heart grow fonder, of course. So all sorts of concerns may be preying on the minds of those different family members. So what we find is the opposite to what you'd hope for. You'd hope the going away date approaches, everybody's happy, lovey-dovey, wave goodbye, nice kiss and embrace and all the rest of it. But what commonly happens is this is a time of irritation. This can be a time when arguments occur. This can be a time when you've got that walking on eggshells experience in the home. And that's quite unfortunate, because often people find that they leave for deployment on the back end of an argument or some bad feeling. It's often a time when emotions get confused. And this is where I want to introduce you to the second psychological principle. We've had emotional spare capacity. The second psychological principle is this: the mind's ability to attach and detach from objects of emotional importance. Now, the serving person, as well as the family members, of course, know that they're going to be separated for a considerable period of time. Now, the mind is a sort of self-defense thing, and again, to different degrees with different people at different times, but often people find that they start to detach emotionally from the relationships, from the place, from the activities which they're normally involved in. So this is where people start to ask themselves the questions: do I still love her? Am I still wanting to be in this relationship? Do I still want to do this hobby with this group of people? They find their emotions become confused. This happens for everybody concerned, and so this can be quite an emotionally confusing period of time. And the feelings you hope you might have tend to be alarmingly absent. Now, the advice we give people, the $1,000,000 piece of advice at these pinch points when our emotional spare capacity narrows down, is, for goodness sake, do not make any life-changing decisions based on the way you feel at these times. This is a normal process, it's well studied, your feelings will come back. So do not make any life-changing decisions. Do not break up relationships based on the way you feel at these particular times. You need to be calm, clear-headed with your normal emotions in place before you make life-changing decisions. So the person deploys. Often that system is quite smooth. Sometimes it isn't. Often the date is brought forward, delayed, the transport is taken off. I've had the experience of going to the airhead to deploy and coming back because relationships have changed. So it's this goodbye, or you're back again when you go in, and this plays on the emotions. But nevertheless, ultimately, deployment takes place. Now, the detachment that has taken place here has to turn into attachment. The serving person hits the ground and has to attach to the new people, the new relationships, the new place, the job routine, the shift routine, everything that's in place on deployment. And a little time has to be taken for this cone to widen up again in this way, so that the person has full emotional capacity available to them to be carrying on in steady state to do their job. Similarly, people back home have to get used to the absence of the serving person. They have to develop their own routines, and they have to get their emotional spare capacity back as best they can as well. Now this period, certainly for the serving person, is well studied, and for most people it takes 2 to 3 weeks, we've found, for sleep patterns to return to normal, for people to get used to the shift pattern, used to the weather. Maybe there's a different climate in the place they deploy to. The food will maybe be different, the relationships. And this is where all those worries, those concerns, will I get on with the people? Will I be able to do the job? Will I be able to cope with the climate? This is when all this, hopefully, best case scenario, settles down. In 2 to 3 weeks, you're in steady state and you're good to go. Now during this time, when you're still feeling a bit tired, a bit ropey, the important thing is to establish communication with the people you left behind back home. And most people, most of the time, do that perfectly well. Unfortunately, not everybody does. Not everybody feels inclined to do so. It may be you've left home on the back of an argument and you don't want to be the one to make the first move. It may be your emotions are still confused. Do I want to be in this relationship? It may be you know that to hear that voice on the end of the phone, or to see that face on the screen if you're using Skype or FaceTime, you know it's going to be upsetting for you. And you're a bit embarrassed about that. The $1 million piece of advice at this stage is, for goodness sake, just do it. Because for the sake of digging deep and making a big effort at this time, you could ruin the rest of your life. That's the point. We know it's difficult, but just do it. Once you've established contact the first time, it does become easier. And certainly by the time you're in steady state, things generally settle down to normal routine and normal modes of communication. Okay, time goes by. However long your deployment is, what's for sure is that this is a period of time in your lives that you do not share with those closest to you. You don't share them with your friends and your family back home. Your paths have diverged for this time in your lives. Now here's where I want to introduce you to the third psychological idea. This comes from cognitive psychology, and it's the idea about mental maps. Now the theory is this, that we each navigate our way through life and through the world according to our internal mental map, which we've developed when we were young, which we've added to during our lives, and this is the way we interpret what goes on in the world. Now the map isn't reality, the map is our understanding of the world. And the whole idea of being a human being in this world is that we go through life, we have certain experiences, we expand our mental map becomes more aligned to reality, and in the process we become mature, we become wise. This is what it means to grow as a human being. So this is a very good thing. And the way we grow is by having experiences and integrating them into our internal reality. Now some maps are faulty, some are less than helpful, some send us the wrong way. So for instance, somebody's mental map may tell them that people are untrustworthy and you have to be very suspicious of them. Somebody else's map may say everybody loves me because that's how people are, and if I approach people nicely, people will be nice back to me. Now you can see how these ideas come from experiences we might have experienced early on in our lives. None of those is the full truth, but they are part of the truth. And the idea of becoming wise is to become more aligned to what's real. Now, on deployment, we often experience things that are intense, meaningful things. And so we've given material to integrate into our mental map, which means we will change as a result of our experiences. And this is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. However, some of the things we experience can be quite intense and quite difficult, and normally integrating new material into our mental map is just straightforward, it just happens unconsciously. When we experience difficult things, it may not be as simple as that. It may be stressful, it may mean we need to rethink our whole philosophy of life, revisit our religious convictions, or whatever it is. And some people find that a long, difficult situation, and they may need help talking things through with somebody else who they trust and who is themselves a mature person. Sometimes, of course, on deployment we may experience traumatic things, very, very difficult things, and if you've experienced trauma, you may need the help of a professional to integrate those experiences if they're not to sort of refuse to be integrated and continually cause trouble to you in the future. So again, the wise person takes the help they need so that they can move on with their lives and make all these experiences of life positive things. But the issue we've got here for families is that when you get home, you will both have experienced things that the other person has not been a party to. And you will both have changed as a result, whether it's carrying on with the home and the children and holding down life and doing stuff without the support of a partner, so you lived independently for that time, whether it's that experience on deployment, which is very difficult to share and talk about when you get home. So you will both have changed. You will not be exactly the same people you were when you parted, which means you have to get to know each other again and make allowances for that fact when you reunite. Anyway, time goes by and you're given the going home date. And again we find that this concentrates the mind, it focuses the attention, and the attention narrows down. And strangely, we often again see a narrowing of the cone. This means that people are starting to detach from the job, the relationships, the place on deployment. It also means that people are often a little bit worried about going home and about getting those relationships back on track. So the attention is taken away, the emotional energy is detached from the situation on deployment and is starting to refocus. Now this is a danger time, because if your job involves really difficult, important things, what you don't want is to take your eye off the ball, because this is where accidents can happen. This is where people make mistakes that cost lives. So commanders and bosses need to keep attention focused right up to the end. And each individual understanding this model, they can now realise, of course, that I need to dig deep. I need to keep focused, because we don't want anything to go wrong in the last days. This is also the time when people start to do the time-honoured thing of developing unrealistic expectations of what life's going to be like when I get home. And those unrealistic expectations are very seldom met. Now that's not only happening to the serving person, but the person back home is developing their own expectations of what life is going to be like when the serving partner gets home. And often, of course, those expectations are different. And that can cause problems. So we would now hope that coming home, big embrace, fall into each other's arms, reunited, conquering heroes home, all that's going to be great. And sometimes that happens, and if it does for you, congratulations. But for many people, coming home can be a difficult and stressful time. And again, what needs to happen is to give time for your emotional capacity to return, so you can get all this capacity back. Join the lines here. And so you can then continue the rest of your life with your full emotional spare capacity. However, that's not always so easy. What we say to people at this point in time is please be patient with each other. For the serving person, patiently renegotiate your way back into the home. Somebody else has taken your share of the jobs in your absence. Somebody else has been running the home. They've developed their own routines. For you to immediately walk back in and expect to start doing things as you would like is to disrupt that whole routine that other person has developed, and can be very disruptive. Similarly, for the person who's at home, for the person to come back and to re-establish something that is normal for them is really important. So the fact that they want to come in and start behaving as they did before they went is understandable. So be patient with each other, get to know each other again, and give it a little time. What we find is there's a well-studied period of time here, and that is a period of 4 to 6 weeks. It seems like a long time, but 4 to 6 weeks before most people returning from deployment start to feel normal about being home again. So again, this can be a time of irritation. It can be a time when feelings are not as you would hope they would be. Often people come home looking forward to being on leave, to spending time with the family, to doing normal things. And what they find is they feel very flat, they feel very bored. Feelings do not return as quickly as they'd hoped. So again, this emotional confusion. Is this really what I want out of life? Does family life really suit me? It was so much more fun on deployment when I was with my peers, with my friends. What was going on here on deployment was life and death stuff. It's about mortality, the big questions. I was contributing to important things. And again, the banter amongst peers and colleagues. Home life simply cannot compete with the high and the buzz that a lot of people get when they're deployed. And so people feel flat. Going shopping with a family just doesn't cut it after you've been making life and death situations when you're deployed. Now, your emotions do not just switch on and off. You cannot just come down from a sort of high octane environment simply overnight on the flight back and get into normal family mode again. So it does take a little time. Now, this is a danger period again, because some people, because they feel so flat, just in an attempt to feel normal, start to try and inject a bit of excitement into life. They drive their cars too fast. They go out and spend a whole lot of money they can't afford. Or they start a relationship which would be rather unwise. So again, the $1 million piece of advice is be patient, take it easy. Do not make any life-changing decisions during this period. Give yourself a chance, 4 to 6 weeks, to get back to normal, to re-establish relationships, to allow your feelings, your emotions to get back to normal level again, to steady state. For most people, that will be fine. However, for some people, occasionally, things do not come back to normal in the same way. So if at any stage of this process you are concerned, please talk to somebody in your system who can help you. If after 4 to 6 weeks you're still not feeling great, you think relationship issues, don't fancy going back to my job. Some people have come back and packed their day job in because it was great fun on ops, but at home I'm just bored now, so they pack it in, and then 6 months later they regret it. So do not make any life-changing decisions. If after 4 to 6 weeks, by the time you've finished your post-operational leave, you're still not sure, please go and talk to a professional, to somebody who's got experience of this, who can help you. If those who are close to you, friends and family, are saying things to you like you are not the same person who went away on operations, you've got anger problems, you're Mr. Irritable, you're Mr. Angry, then often people are better judges of us than we are judges of ourselves. So again, take their advice. It doesn't hurt to go and speak to somebody and to get a bit of help. What we find is that the sooner people present themselves for help, the sooner things can be cleared up. So timely intervention is a very useful thing to do. Don't let things go. That's the point. Relationships are not helped by just ignoring the issues. Please come and sort them out. Now, the mnemonic for this is the Christmas cracker. This is a particularly poor drawing of the Christmas cracker, I have to admit, but nevertheless imagine it was a better one. Use your imagination. This is my Christmas cracker theory of the deployment cycle. It's quite easy to understand. 3 principles: emotional spare capacity, which gets eaten into but can return; the mind's and the emotions' ability to detach and to reattach. So being emotional confusion is normal at certain pinch points in this model, so expect them and make allowances for them, make allowances for each other. And the whole idea of mental maps, that we will change, we will grow, we will have material that needs integrating, and that can be a little bit wearing, a little bit difficult if that material is particularly intense and if it challenges the assumptions that we've had before. So coming home and we find each other has changed, that's normal. Now this can all sound like a sort of negative thing, as if deployment is just a real challenge to our normal way of life, but that's not the case, of course. Because we have so many experiences which many other people in our society do not get. Deploying on operations is an extraordinary challenge. Being left literally holding the baby sometimes at home is a challenge as well. Growing as a person through integrating a variety of experiences is what makes us interesting people. It's what helps us to mature, it's what makes us wise. Basically, it gives us stuff to bring to our relationships, to make our relationships more enriched and more interesting. So yes, it may be a bit more challenging, it may be harder, but it is also well worth it. If we can navigate this cycle effectively, we can grow and we can have richer relationships as a result. So, to end on a positive, the Christmas cracker theory of the deployment cycle, if you remember that and you make allowances for those pinch points, I hope you won't go far wrong.